everyone. I am Tom Bowditch and welcome to my very first episode on my podcast, Self Mastery. My first guest today was born with a huge curiosity for human behavior, thought processes, and identity. She's devoted 15 years of study and coaching experience in leadership, accountability, neurolinguistics, hypnosis, breathwork, and emotional change techniques. She's honed down a multifaceted approach to understanding and empowering individuals, and she has graced many stages speaking to thousands, inspiring individuals, and helping guide each individual on their path to self-discovery and fulfillment. Welcome to my podcast and welcome Laura Gratton.
Woo! Can I get a booyah?
Booyah!
Shakalaka-ya.
Shakalaka-ya. Welcome. How are you? Thank you very
I'm
much,
so
firstly, for
good.
joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you for making me numero uno on your podcast. I appreciate it.
I couldn't think of anyone else but you to join me here today.
Thank you.
So tell me, as you can see, I just wanted to go back into the description of what we were talking about. And I just wanted to ask the very first question in what interested you in understanding why people behave the way they do and how they can feel more empowered.
Yay, I love this question. And first and foremost, before we jump straight into it, thank you so much for having me on here. I've known Tom now for almost 2 years, I believe, a little bit less than 2 years.
Yeah, great.
We actually met at a breathwork event/program that we studied together under Trey Williams, and it was such a profound experience to meet you. And we've been besties ever since, bro. You can't get rid of me.
Yeah, correct.
He's tried.
We have been inseparable. So it's been an honor getting to know you on this journey called life.
I think I'm the only human that annoys you in the world because I'm allowed to as your bestie.
Yeah,
so
you are,
yeah, it's great. I get away with a lot.
You are probably the only person I can allow that.
Great, perfect. So thank you so much for asking me to be on here. And I love that question. It's also so interesting to hear your own bio being read out to you because a lot of people ask on podcasts like, who are you and how did you come to be and what's your story? And when getting asked these questions, it's so interesting to see what are the things that come up because life itself has this profound way of teaching us things and profound ways for us to have a soul experience and a physical experience in this world. And some of the things that I wrote down were like, oh yeah, these are definitely pivotal points and this is definitely who I am as a person. So the reason why I first started getting interested in human behavior was it was a natural curiosity that I just got really clear on as time passed. So I find in life, sometimes there are certain values that are ingrained in us, or there's certain aspects of us that just crave certain things in life and we get so curious about certain things. And then there's things in life that we kind of are conditioned to believe that we're interested in that just aren't true. And as I've gone on in life, I was thinking into, as I started coaching and wanting to lead people and wanting to learn more about people, it started to reflect back on me of what are the things that genuinely spike my interest in life. And I found myself constantly being drawn to wanting to understand the human psyche. And what I grew to discover over years and years of coaching and a variety of life experience is that I was always so curious in people's stories, but not just the words that were being used, the meaning and beliefs underneath it. And so finding those different layers in people of why do they say what they're saying? What does it actually mean in their heart, in their spirit, in their emotional intellect? And why do they choose to take the actions that they choose? And this has just been such a general curiosity of mine because I find that when we really dive deep into the humanness part of us, like who we are, what we're about, you can start to almost predict what's going to happen next with people. If you have certain values or certain thoughts or certain beliefs that are ingrained or that are so natural to you and almost unconscious, then you can almost predict what's going to happen next in your life or what's going to happen next for the people in your life.
It's because you can see that everything has a pattern, right?
Yes.
So it sort of repeats itself unless you can break that pattern and that thought process. And I guess that's probably what's gained your curiosity, right?
1,000%. And I think that's why you and I both studied neurolinguistics, right? It's like, okay, so we're hearing words, but how is this triggering thought processes in the mind? And then those thought processes that are repeated over time start to become actions, and those actions repeated over time become ingrained behaviors. But what was curious to me is after like getting very interested in Joe Dispenza's work and epigenetics and all these beautiful things that are becoming more and more aware to us, is the power of change. And so in that power of change is that, yes, we can keep going down the trajectory of what is predictable, but what if we could be anything we wanted to be, or what if we could achieve anything that we desired? And so in coaching, I just find it so incredible now that I can apply this line of interest or curiosity into a line of work that makes sense to me. And so something that, again, going off a little bit of a tangent, but it's all relative, what I found in life was one of my biggest frustrations in life was when people were saying they wanted to do something, but they weren't doing it. And I thought, how could I actually solve this problem, specifically for women, because I work a lot with women in all the lines of work that I do. How can I solve this problem for women of them not just saying they want something, or not just talking about the dream and the vision of what they want to bring into their life, but actually actualizing and materializing that idea or that thought into behaviors that were going to help them get there. And quite frankly, that's literally what's brought me into every kind of season of my life, into the next layers, the next steps, is to be like, okay, what do I actually need to do? And yes, you kind of almost sometimes dragging the emotional process with you, like, oh my God, this is petrifying. I hate every second of this. But there's a greater thing on the other side of that. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, you have answered
What was the question?
But I can repeat it if you want me to.
It doesn't matter. Did you get something out of that? Perfect.
100%. Thanks. I kind of need to ask you a question and just sort of take a seat back and let you speak the whole podcast, but that's okay. No, but as you said, change and helping people change, but change is inevitable. It's something we need to change to evolve. Mm-hmm. And through that's where it sort of guides us, but we can create that change if we know how to. And that's sort of where I can see you stepping in and helping women. Like you love to help women guide them through the change and help them evolve through your change in emotional techniques, through the hypnosis. But what's sort of coming to the next question, which is like, how did starting your own business connect with your interest in leading others and growing as a person?
That is so interesting. They almost happened simultaneously. So to backtrack, when I first started my business, I was 19. So it was very, I guess you can call that young. I don't know in comparison to what. But I first started getting interested in personal development at 17. Someone handed me a book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And just to...
Can you say that again for just a little bit slower for the listeners?
Can you tell I'm excited?
Yeah.
I listen to voice notes on 2 times speed. So sometimes I forget I don't need to talk in 2 times speed. It's like starting to become this ingrained thing. So when I was 17, I was in quite a dark place. I was experiencing quite significant anxiety. And one of my friends was noticing that I needed some kind of help or some kind of guidance. So she handed me a book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers. Or it's Face the Fear and Do It Anyway. It's one of those 2. So I started reading this book and it started really shifting my own thought processes and behaviors. At the same time, I was a retail employee. I was a casual. And after reading that book, I started to get promoted quite quickly, actually, in my role, from being a casual to an assistant manager to a manager within the space of 4 months. And that was quite unheard of in their company. But these opportunities kept arising and I kept being presented opportunities to step in. And what I found in this time frame, before I started my business, I was a manager quite young. I really understood and started to experience what it was like to lead people when people are looking to you for guidance. Yeah. And what I found really interesting in my natural instinct to lead people was not to lead from the front. I didn't have to be the loudest person in the room, but I found if I was going to get the best results in my job, in my career and others' careers, was to understand the psyche of the people that I was working with. So I started asking questions of, what do you actually want out of this job? Who are you as a person? And how can I help you proceed? Like, how can I help you grow within this industry? Now, some people would present to me that they just wanted money. And I'm like, okay, so their probably heart wasn't in the actual job. And then there was others that said, I really want to be the best visual merchandiser. I worked in retail, so I really want to be the best visual merchandiser. So I'm like, okay, great. I started putting them in areas where they could start to flourish in that area. That wasn't my strength, so that was perfect. And then others would say, I want to be a manager. I really want to lead people. I want to lead for a team and I want to learn about this dynamic. So then I would always have them by my side, teaching them everything I was doing, everything I was thinking, so they could start to understand the psyche of what it took to become that. And within the first 6 months of me being the manager at this store, we became the number 1 store in Australia.
Let's give you a little clap.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, that's an achievement. Well done. In 4 months. Now,
Yeah.
a quick question just in between that. How did the opportunity arise because someone had left, or did you just work your way through through that level up, or?
So I'm an Italian background. So
Yeah.
I'm a.
That's why you're so fiery.
I'm like, yeah.
Little pocket rocket.
It's almost like ingrained in my blood to work my ass off.
Yeah.
So I've had to really grow through that, but I worked my ass off and I honestly did not know the difference. So you put me in front of a vision or mission or a dream and I'm like, what do I have to do to reach the top? How do I how do I need to show up, or who do I need to be to just exceed and succeed in this? Now, yes, there's some complexities within that of like perfectionism and all these other things that take part, but that drive and that force of nature that exists within me I get really bored if I'm not growing personally. So I'm just like, I need to get to the top. I need to keep moving forward. I need to go. But it worked because it inspired so many women in that community to move on to some amazing, amazing things. So they did, to answer your question, it happened simultaneously. I was given a book. At the same time, I was already applying myself in an industry that then helped me to skyrocket as I was applying the things that I was learning in that book. And I highly recommend that book to anyone that's listening.
I'm going to go buy it after this interview.
And I don't even know like if it's still around. Like, you know, it's not a book that people talk about a lot. I've read many, many books since that one, but that's what I needed at that point in time. So it helped me just go, okay, take the action. Don't buy into the fear or the understanding we have of fear.
What is your understanding of fear?
So if we understand the psyche first of where fear actually comes from is that, and let's go way, way back, right?
Yeah.
Way back to the beginning of time when the dinosaurs were around.
Yeah.
A little bit fast forward past that. But in our minds, like our brains are designed to keep us safe. So if our brains are designed to keep us safe, well, it needs some kind of hormone or some kind of instinct to keep us away from unsafe situations. And so back in the days, we might have been scared about, you know, physically dying from natural occurrences like animals out in the jungle or natural disasters taking place. And so we almost need that heightened state of awareness of our surroundings. Where we apply that into our life now, because we live in a relatively safe world, right? Relatively safe. We don't have tigers chasing us. Sure, we have angry bosses sometimes.
Some parts of the world you do.
Depends where you live.
Depends where you live, yeah.
Depends what you reference as a tiger.
Yeah.
Some of us have enemies and all things that we want to run away from, right? But that part of our brain is still triggered by certain things today that probably don't make sense for us to react in the way that we do, in the way that we are designed to do. So we really start to spike that sense of fear a lot in unnecessary circumstances. And that's where a lot of anxiety now comes from, that is based on like our conditioning or the way that we're now showing up in this world that can feel quite chaotic because it's an information-based age that we're living in now, where we're constantly being inundated with information, which is more to think about, more to worry about, all these things. So there's pros and cons of this. But my understanding of fear now, and the best way to gain a healthy perspective, is to know that it exists, to acknowledge the fact it exists, and to not try to run away from fear.
Run into it.
Almost, yeah. I run with it.
Yeah, run with it.
Yeah, I run with it. And why I say that is that a lot of the time we're either moving towards love or we're running away from fear. So if we're doing that, well, then we have a push-pull effect, and that also doesn't work. If you're running towards love, you're running away from fear. So what I kind of see is they're both energies that exist. They're both chemical responses that happen in the body through thought processes and emotions. And so if we can actually make friends with fear and say, hey, buddy, like, if you were my friend right now, what could we go and experience together? And fear's like, nothing, I'm so scared. And you're like, can I show you what's possible? Like, why don't I take you by my side and I'll walk with you and I'll take you towards love, success, and all these amazing things, and I'll show you what's possible.
I love that you have used that analogy with fear, being able to just use fear as a friend and then just using it to walk with you and walking with it and noticing that mentally that it's okay. That everything will be okay. And through the fear equals growth.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
So why not just go and try it? And if it fails, what did you have to lose in the first place?
1,000%.
You're back at square one again. So
And that's where fear wants to keep you because
Exactly.
it keeps you safe in a comfort zone.
in a survival mode, right?
Yeah, so we can almost like retrain fear
Oh,
to look
yeah.
at life differently.
Correct, especially with that mindset. I'm actually going to take that away with me.
It's yours.
I-
Copyright Laura
I-
Gratton on this podcast, please. That's what friends are for.
Thanks, Laura. Laura Gratton. All right, so I'm going to come to another question. Can you tell us also about a special moment from your travels that changed how you see life and learning about yourself? Because you said, and you had mentioned that you backpacked around the world. So I do want to hear some
Knew
stories.
that would come up in convo.
Yeah, I do want to hear some of these stories. So please elaborate.
Yeah, so when I was 23, so I'd been running business at this point for 5 years. So it was how would you say, like a cluster manager and running a fashion business online for 5 years simultaneously. So I was very stressed out. And I had this beautiful moment in life, a wake up, an epiphany, if you'd call it, a seasonal change that almost my gut instinct, my intuition was like, F
Change is
this.
inevitable, right?
Yeah, like it led me. My mind was not in the game with this decision, but I'd made the decision to get rid of my first business, quit my job, which was a surprise because they were like, you're going to be the next, international this and that. And they were thinking about moving the company overseas at the time.
Can I just ask a question there? Did that not get you to hold back? Or did you follow that intuition that said, no, I need to leave?
Nothing at that point could help me back. It was that loud.
Yeah,
It
cool.
was so loud. And even though there was so many promising things taking place in my life at quite a young age, my business was doing really well. It was making more than my salary, which I had no idea because, of course, I didn't track the numbers. I was like, this is fun. And my job, my career was very promising. Like I'd scaled up the ladder quite quick to the point where they're like, well, we're either going to make you an international this or that, or like there's nowhere else to move. And I'd opened up many stores and I'd created a lot of success for that company. It was the best experience ever. But I was so mentally drained and emotionally drained that my gut instinct almost took over and was like, this isn't it. Like there is so much more to life. So I didn't tell anyone. I just went and applied for a visa, to go to the UK. And as that was getting approved, I was also just making plans in the background of like leaving my job, getting rid of all the stock in my business, ending a 2-year relationship that was quite challenging, no fault of anyone's. It was both of us just simultaneously not finding the harmony. And there was just so much chaos in my life internally. You wouldn't know it from the outside, but internally there was a lot of chaos. And I did all of this within a couple of months. I got on a plane to move overseas and lo and behold, like I had one backpack with me. I traveled for 2.5 years, having no idea how long I was going to go for. I was like, maybe I'll go for 3 months and we'll see what happens. 2.5 years later, I came back to Australia for a wedding. And the most profound experience I had over there, because there's so many stories, was actually in Africa. So this was towards the end of my trip. I was in Nairobi and I was on the last little bit of money that I had. I had no money coming in at this stage. So I was just working off the resources and the money that I'd saved up for the 5 years. And I just remember this huge epiphany moment or this sudden change in my world when I was watching these beautiful kids playing on the footpath with pebbles. And I have never in my life seen so much happiness and joy radiate out of someone's soul the way that I saw that.
I've been to Nairobi as well. And,
right.
And it's like less is more, like they're happy with nothing. They haven't got a phone to distract them. It's like with the phone you can be connected, but at the same time you're disconnected to the world. And they don't have that problem. So they're just running around in nature and just having fun with what they've got.
I couldn't agree more. And what was so interesting about what you said that gave me this huge epiphany again is they had nothing, but they had everything at their fingertips. And I found that their version of what a problem was so different to the way we live in the Western world. And I don't want to right or wrong or say what should be or shouldn't be, because that's totally up to the individual and, and then look at the society and the culture of it. But what I found so interesting about Africa was it humbled me to my knees. Of all the stuff that I would worry about in Melbourne, I used to have these anxious feelings of like I couldn't leave the house unless I had my fake eyelashes on, my fake tan. I had to look like, 9 out of 10 before I left the house because I was so worried about how the world viewed me. I was so many fears, so many perceived fears that I'd created about my identity, how I felt safe in the world. And I was really like unwell, and this really brought me to my knees of what do I actually care about and what gives meaning and significance into my life. And that's when I started opening up my heart to connection. And that was one of the most profound and almost simple things that I experienced overseas that created drastic change. And lo and behold, it was the same time that I was simultaneously experiencing being broke for the first time in my life. So I'd exhausted my resources. I'd sold my brand new convertible in Melbourne because that's just the life I used to live. I love convertibles and I used to rely on them.
Yeah, right.
But like,
what did you have?
It was really nice. It was a Megane. It was my third convertible. Clearly, I was young and didn't understand how the money worked. So.
Now how she's evolved, Laura doesn't even
I don't
need
have a car. Oh my God. Thank you. Thank you for that realization. And I'm so happy. I'm so happy.
And the amount of money you're saving as well, just from not spending it on petrol.
Well, actually, to be transparent and vulnerable, this is probably the second season of me experiencing not having lots of money. And I feel like the most successful I felt in life. So I definitely want to call money in, and I definitely want to live in abundance for the level of impact I can create. But again, everything we experience in life is teaching us lessons. And what I learned from Africa, that I can survive without money. And it taught me that there's more important things in life. It also taught me the importance of money, because for me to create impact would be to be making lots of money as well. So this is the season I'm in now, which is calling money in. So I don't think that I would enjoy my character as much if I had not experienced what it felt like to be broke the 2 times that I have now.
But it's also understanding self-worth too, you know, and the value of that energetic exchange of offering what you do for bringing in that abundance and bringing in that cash flow. Which, coming to another question, which is what I wanted to ask you, is why did you decide to start coaching people and speaking in public about your experiences and ideas?
I never chose it, Tom.
It just came to you.
I never consciously or had any awareness that that's what I chose for my path. I transparently, and I might have shared this with you before, my biggest fear prior to going overseas, and even past going overseas, was public speaking, to the point I had to do public presentations as a manager in front of intimate groups. But I used to, when I was in high school, skip school, oh my God, probably 2 days a week, just in case I had to present that way, those days. I was petrified. Any idea of someone looking at me or me being vulnerable in front of an audience was like so overwhelmingly petrifying that I just wouldn't show up at school. And somehow I got away with it for quite some time. It was wild. I managed to not really have to present ever. I had pity parties for myself. I told the teachers sob stories about I just wasn't capable of it and blah, blah, blah. So it never was something I consciously chose. It was something that was put upon me when I was in Brisbane, and I flew down to a conference in Melbourne with one of my mentors at the time, and I might have been 27, I'm guessing at this stage, 25, 27, somewhere around there. And I flew down to Melbourne, my mentor knowing that public speaking was my greatest fear at this point in time. And he said to me as I was entering the room, "You're going to be the second speaker tonight," and winked at me. And I wanted to tear him apart.
I would have loved to see that.
Yeah, this is a full-grown man. And if anyone that obviously you can't see me on the podcast, I'm like 4'9".
Is that how tall you are?
Something like that.
I was giving you a little bit more. I thought you were about
I appreciate that.
5'1", but
Well, yeah, sure. We'll go with that.
Sure.
Absolutely. But yeah, that was like one of the first times I'd presented, and it was the most liberating experience I had, because what I realized from that experience was that it was the thought of something that was debilitating me, not the actual experience itself. So it was the fear I had created in my body. Again, like we were talking about before, where does fear come from? It was the idea that I had. And it was my body responding to something that I hadn't really ever experienced before. I don't know where that came from.
You sort of created in your own mind how it was going to plan out.
Almost, yeah. And maybe that comes from a past experience that I just can't remember in this point in time. But being up there was so liberating that I almost found this incredible sense of power in overcoming that debilitating thought and belief that I was so scared of, that now it's something like I live for.
Yeah, it's funny when you sort of put yourself out of your comfort zone, and you show that you are yourself, that you are capable of doing it, that you are, like you thrive through being uncomfortable, right? Be able to expect the unexpected and be comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Like what's possible on the other side of that, right? You know, we don't know until we put ourselves, or you get forced into situations, right? Again, never chose it.
But hey, look, being forced into situations, again, it puts you in a position of, okay, well, now I have to find a solution, and how do I deal with this?
100%. Yeah.
Which I would like to also ask you, which is, how did you bring together your different life experiences and skills when helping others grow and change?
I love this. Yeah, so to be honest, because it's been such a long time. How do you even judge time, right? I'm in my 30s, so I haven't been around that long, but that's half my life that I've been really curious about personal development. So I think all the things that I've studied and the things that I've applied myself to almost become intuitive, that every single client I have, and this has been a pro and a con, but every single client I have is different. Great, that's the pro. Every approach I have is different. And so when I'm trying to sell, what do I do as a coach? I have no idea what to tell people, because I'm like, well, it's different for everyone. Some people come to me and, you know, we build a business together. Some people come to me and they just want to become more self-confident. Some people come to me and they want to learn how to cry. You know, they want to know how to be vulnerable and express emotion. So it's like each woman that comes to me has a different outcome they're seeking. And my job as a coach, or the thing that I love to do as a coach, is to guide them into that outcome the best way that I can see fit based on what I know. So it's not to say that every client experiences breathwork with me. It's not to say that every client will experience business building activities. So it literally changes as we go. So I guess in terms of how have I brought that together, chaotically, messily, like it's been all over the place at times, and then it just comes together in these beautiful ways when I'm working with the energy of the person.
I love that.
If that makes any sense.
I understood exactly
Fantastic.
what you were putting down. It's it's funny that, you know, just people come to just express themselves and try and be vulnerable and want to know how to be vulnerable. Especially, do you do much work with men?
This is a really beautiful question. So I have done so in the past. And I think, honestly, thank you for bringing this to my awareness, because do you know what's really funny about that?
Tell me.
Talk about comfort zones. I've known women and have been around women my whole life, right? I had two sisters. I have two sisters. I didn't had. They're still around. I have two beautiful sisters, and I also worked in retail, which was all women. I went to an all-women's school. All of my friends tend to be women. So it's like, that's my comfort, that's my knowingness, that's my strength. And so, of course, play to your strengths, and then also explore those parts of yourself that are available that maybe test your character or test our understanding of life as we know it, so we can think outside the box. So I did coach men for 5 years. It was more, I guess, like I coached a mentorship group. So it was like 100 people that I would individually work with or run groups with, or help run events, like host events within that space. So I indirectly and directly worked with men. It was predominantly younger men, younger than me. And yeah, I loved it, but I guess I didn't know it as well as I could understand women. But at the end of the day, when you understand people, you can understand how to best guide them into themselves, their truth, and what they need to move forward. I just find, again, this is a test for me, is that women are so familiar to me, and I didn't necessarily always have a great understanding of men, and it's something I constantly work through without going too much into the story in the background. But my number one role model was my dad. And bless his heart, but he struggled with alcoholism and mental health for so much of my life that I almost couldn't understand that masculine role, and I almost adopted that masculine role to fill the blank or fill the void in the family dynamic, and I didn't have the best idea of that. So I walked through life very confused for so much of my life of what is the man's role, and, you know, how do I work with a man, opposed to almost see it as like, how can I cover his ground, you know, like how can I do what he wasn't doing? And I used to apply this to some relationships, and it was really horrible. So I work with men, and I had worked with men, and I've learned a lot through it. And it's still like something I constantly, you know, evolve into. It's still something I learn every day.
Yeah, because I know, I'm not speaking just on behalf of me, but sometimes, you know, we do try and find it hard to express emotions. And to
You mean as a man?
Yeah, like
Sure.
Me personally as well, I sometimes find it hard to express emotions to anyone. but to be able to come to someone and to be shown and held and hold a safe space, that would be something I would be interested in, and I'm sure other men would be too, and that's something that maybe possibly you could look into or offer or something like that, because I know we would definitely would come to you, and I would definitely be interested in something like that. So I do have another question for you, which is, what does being a good leader mean to you personally? And how do you try to show that?
I love this question. So I think, great leaders, there's so many things that come to mind. A great leader is someone that is authentic and genuine and can almost lead themselves in many situations, and also know where it's appropriate to lean into vulnerability and support as well, which I think is so necessary. I think a great leader isn't the one that necessarily stands at the front and tells everyone what to think and how to do and how to follow them. A great leader is someone that actually inspires and uplifts the people around them. And something I've seen in my business, the sisterhood movement, my baby, like the crux of every part of me, I just love that business so much, is that the women in that space, specifically the ones that I work with one-on-one that are also in that community, what I have found is the level of self-responsibility that they take. And the beauty behind the way that they show up in the world is, I have never, ever, in the time that I've known them, ever told them what to do. They have just found the deepest parts of themselves and their truth, that they shine that through so obviously to the other women in the space, that they're almost like a magnet and a conduit of the work that I desire to have in this world, which is the more we become one with ourselves and the more that we understand ourselves at our deepest form, not the conditioning that we subscribe to that happens in the world around us subconsciously and consciously. But they are so certain of themselves that they are inspired by helping other women find those parts of themselves as well. So I've never ever, in my time of coaching these incredible women one-on-one and the community, none of them come to me with blame of someone else. They come to me with self-responsibility. They come to me with, I was challenged by this thing and I want to know how I can better overcome it and show up as a woman. And I just find, to actually be witness to that as a coach and as someone that runs the community or hosts the community, it is like the work is being done around me, and that I'm not necessarily like, I always say this to the women, that I almost don't want to be referenced as the leader of sisterhood. The vision I've always had for this community and this space, which I think creates way more strength and growth in numbers, is that I'm here to offer space, but I'm one person. So if everyone expected something from me that I was unable to provide at that magnitude, then it would be ineffective. So if I can help women create safety and space for themselves to overcome what they need to, process what they need to, become the best version of themselves, then the work just radiates and emanates out of that community without my necessary direct communication to the women that are changing their own lives. And that's through other leaders in the group. That's through people leading themselves. So I almost struggle to call myself a leader of that community, because I see so many other women coming into that space as the individuals that they are, that add so much value to this community, that we're all leading ourselves.
There's a beautiful quote which I just love, which is, never below you, never above you, always beside you. And that's that. You can take that quote into being a leader, so that just you're never above and you're never below someone. You're always working with them, not not for them.
I freaking love that, Tom, because I think all of us get so rapidly caught up in the hierarchy or the pedestaling.
Yes.
Oh, this person's created so much more than me, or this person is so much more confident than me. And it's like, yeah, but you have other gifts in other areas that are constantly inspiring people. So let's not look to your losses. Let's play to your strengths, and let's just be aware of where you also desire to grow. And that's beautiful.
And we're just going back into sisterhood. And for the people that don't know sisterhood, can you please just elaborate on that?
Oh, this is my baby. I love this community so much. So sisterhood in its entirety is so many different things, but the key pillars we have in sisterhood is movement, breath, meditation, and connection. So in everything we do, we always bring that energy into each event, into each experience that we have with the girls. And the vision behind all of it, the whole thing, was to create a safe space for women where they could be seen, loved, heard, and understood in all that they are, in all that they've been, in everything they're becoming. And that's a little mantra we live by with sisterhood, is thank you for who you are, thank you for who you've been, and thank you for all that you're becoming. We say that at every event, hand in hand, almost like cult-like behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because a
not a
cult is
cult.
just people that believe in the same thing. So, I mean, we do run a cult. Yes, we do. It depends
But
what
a
that means to
positive
you.
one. It's a positive cult, people.
I actually had to look up the meaning of cult because I joked with the girls at an event the other day and I was like, what does cult even mean? Like, we have this negative connotation. And a cult literally said, like, a group of people that believe in the same thing. I'm like, we're all in cults. Like, are you kidding? It's so funny.
Society.
I know, literally, it's so funny. In some way, shape, or form, we do exist within that. We coincide on the similar beliefs, and who knows if it's ours or someone else's. But yeah, to answer your question, sisterhood is that space, and it has been that space since January. And what I love about January last year, 2023, and in that year alone, we've had like 750 women now come into that space. And
I didn't know that.
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well
actually
done.
reflected on that. End of last year, it was 550. It's already increased to 750 from events, from movement sessions we hold. And we just have so many different ways in which we express that mission and that vision through movement sessions on the beach where we're moving our bodies, we're breathing, we're meditating, we're connecting with one another. We have retreats, we have coaching programs that I just love providing for the women because every coaching program has like every call has an action point. So we hold each other accountable every week. Some of the shit that has gone down on those calls that have been achieved on the call or directly after the call is profound. When women work in numbers, it is incredible what you can create individually and collectively.
And it's important to, because some people can't keep themselves accountable, and just to have other women to be able to keep them accountable for it and for showing up, not just showing up for them, but for showing up for themselves.
It is so wild that you say that, Tom, because it's something that comes up in sisterhood a lot, and I love this, is that we do naturally, some of us, get really challenged to hold ourselves accountable. And I thought, okay, well, instead of wronging ourselves for that, what could be like the solution? Because so many people are like, I lack focus, or my ADHD is this and that, and we have all these conditions that we think we're debilitated by, right? But instead, the way I like to see it is, okay, what works for you, what doesn't work for you? And also, if you can't hold yourself accountable, who ever showed you how to hold yourself accountable? And if no one's ever been shown how to do a certain thing, how do we expect ourselves to understand and comprehend that on a base level? So something we teach in sisterhood a lot is how can we showcase and role model what it is that that person needs so then they can understand it. Because if your parents, like, bless their hearts, doing the best that they can as you're growing up, but if they didn't know how to do something, where are you meant to learn that?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's almost like this reparenting that takes place in sisterhood. And I don't love that word or that terminology, but just for, this is the first word that's coming up in this moment, is it nearly is like teaching women the things that they hadn't learned previously so that they can then become the best version and not have shame in the fact you can be an adult and still not know how to set boundaries. Like, fuck, I learned that 3 years ago. I'm still learning it. And I used to judge myself hardcore, but I was like, who ever showed me that? No one.
Yeah. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. So now I love learning it. I'm like, I could blame my past, or I could just look to the future and go, where could I meet people that know the things that I don't know and are experts in their field that can showcase it for me?
So do you use your resources to bring in other people for breath work or any of those connections, or do you run it yourself?
Interesting. So we've done both.
Yeah.
So this year I've been running it by myself. And something I wrote on my board at the November last year, my business partner left because she's moving overseas. Best experience of my life building this business with her. And then also better experience learning it, how to do it by myself. Like, I needed both. Yeah. So I'm like, I love you so much for being there, and I love you so much for giving me the opportunity to like scare the shit out of myself by running it by myself. But I've been running it all by myself this year, and I've learned different things within that. And again, it definitely works better in numbers and inspiring women to step up into their line, their service of genius. Like, what's their code of genius that they love and they're really good at, that they've spent their life studying. And then I have my zone of genius that I've spent my life studying that I can bring to the table. So both exist 100%. We've had women come in and lead from the front and lead from behind and all sorts of things. I've just recently hired someone for sisterhood for the first time. So she's working with me this week. And that feels really good because on my board I wrote, you can do it all, but why do you need to?
I like that.
What are you trying to prove to yourself?
Just freeing up some time for yourself as well to then concentrate on other things.
On macro stuff, not trying to do all the micro because it gives me a sense of pride or ego.
I would love if you can share a story about someone that you've helped that really shows how much of a difference you can make.
Love that question. Thank you, Tom. Oh, God. It's almost like this collective energy that comes to mind. So I'm going to get more specific because I think into like all my one-on-one coaching, and almost every woman has compounded time of what they thought they could achieve and done it in less time than they ever thought was available to them, just from the level of support and their level of commitment to self. So to think about specific things, there's so many beautiful women that come to mind. And I'm going to use my friend Georgie as an example because it's very alive for me in this moment. This morning at a sisterhood event that we hosted called Coffee and Connect, it's every Friday at 6:30 at Social Brew.
Where's
Get
that?
on it. James Street, Burleigh Heads. Be there. But it was really cool. She reached out to me 2 weeks ago and she said, "Hey, Laura, did you know this is my first year anniversary on this Coffee and Connect date? I want to celebrate." And I was like, I would love to celebrate you. What like moved me to tears this morning is, obviously, as someone that's running a community, you don't always watch the intricacies that take place because you're so in your business that sometimes you can miss the magic that takes place when you're busy. And she reminded me of all these beautiful things that had happened in her world over the last year. And what I didn't realize about her until this morning, when I met Georgie, this is Georgie Say. She runs an amazing podcast as well that is for women called Say It to Your Soul, or Say It to something like that. I hope I don't get it wrong, so find her online. But the beautiful part of Georgie is that I just thought she'd been running podcasts her whole life. I thought she'd been doing all these wonderful things her whole life when I met her. And she only told me this morning that since going to her first sisterhood retreat in May last year, she had started building out a podcast and started building out all these things. And I was like, well, what inspired you? And she said, well, like sisterhood. She has been religiously to every single event that sisterhood has ever hosted. She has a beautiful altar in her room, like a vision board, a vision space in her room. Everything on that table is sisterhood related. She's like, sisterhood literally transformed and built the person that I am today. And for me to hear that, I was like, my work here is done. She's gone on to build an event, and I'm sure she won't mind me saying this. She's gone on to build an event for a community in celebration of Stephen Bartlett coming to Australia that she was hesitating about. We grabbed one conversation around it and she's like, yes, I'm going to do it, and she committed to it.
Yep.
And so all these things that used to scare her, that she used to hesitate around, like she landed her dream job within the first 3 or 4 weeks of me coaching her. And sometimes we underestimate the impact that we can make from what we know, and we forget that some people just need to be seen, heard, loved, and understood. And the best things one of my mentors ever taught me that I live by today is seek first to understand before being understood.
Can we say that one more time?
Yeah. So seek first to understand before being understood.
I like that.
What does this mean to me? And then it might mean something else to you. So take what you want and leave the rest behind. What this means to me is that if you show enough interest in someone, then you will learn more about that person and yourself than you would if you were just telling them what you think. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not a place for both opinions and stories to be shared, but when we listen more actively, you learn more about society and humanity as we know it. And when you show interest in people and show that level of unconditional love into who they are and what they're about, watch them fucking shine. Like, she has completely transformed. And the feedback I get from every one-on-one client I work with, and I kid you not, I have 1 million messages in my phone, 1 million, okay, it's a bit dramatic, but many messages in my phone about my clients. And every time I get these messages, the same consistent like behavior or like pattern I see in this is, what did you do to her? She's a completely different human, because they transform so rapidly through being coached or being part of the sisterhood community. Like, they're unrecognizable.
Sometimes all we need is just someone in our corner.
I know.
Someone to just believe in you.
Can it be that easy? Who would have thought?
It can be. Mm-hmm. It can be, because sometimes we just don't believe in ourselves, and that self-doubt creeps in. And that's what holds us back again, coming back to what we were discussing earlier, is fear. Am I capable of doing this? We ask ourselves these questions. And just coming back to that is just someone that's showing you that you are capable, showing you that you know, in a positive way, that you can do it. Just try it. What have you got to lose? You know, what have you got to lose?
Your ego.
Correct. And once you drop
Every
that
time.
ego and what other people care and think about you, that's
I
when life
know,
starts. That's
something
when
we all
life
battle
starts.
with. Yeah. I'd love to ask you, Tom, as well, because this is your first podcast and this is very exciting.
Yeah.
And I've been with you since the beginning of you having, well, maybe not since the very beginning of you having this idea. It's probably been with you for longer than I know. But since you've been talking about doing this, I want to ask you what? I want to ask you, like, what inspired you to actually commit to that vision and that dream that you had to do a podcast?
Great question.
You're welcome.
And thank you for throwing that back at me.
Of course.
To be able to not just have guests come on and learn from them myself, but to share the information with others and allow others to learn themselves too, and to show that without action, it's just a thought.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever you have in your mind, and if it's something that you really want to do, again, as I said earlier, what do you have to lose? Just try it. See if you like it. And that's what I've done.
100%.
And I've finally done that. But to have like people like you in my corner, believing it, that's what I'm saying. It helps. It really helps you move forward. It really helps you act on that thought. And I finally had put it all into action, and it's coming to fruition. So you manifest that stuff, you put it on a board. Like I have a board, and I wrote everything that I wanted maybe a year ago. And I've put about 15 things down that I've wanted to do. 10 of them have been ticked off. And now this is something I can now just put a green tick next to it as well. And it's just something that I've really wanted to do, and I've manifested it. And every day I've thought about it, visioned it, and processed it. And to finally sit here and have you as my first guest, honored to have you with me and share this moment with you. And so I'm really grateful for you being here with me on this one. And thank you for asking me that question, throwing it back to me. I didn't.
My honor, I think it's so important because, you taking action, stepping forward and being here now in this moment is inspiring, right? And for anyone listening to this podcast, to understand why it got created and where the vision came from, I think is so beautiful. And I remember sitting with you and mapping out the vision behind this podcast. And then we were creating the name together of like, oh, do you like this? What about this? And
I had I come up with some questions with mastery, and you just came to me and just said, what about self-mastery? And
because it's you.
And I was just like, bang on. That is exactly the podcast I want to create. I want to learn from others. As you said before, we're always learning. And I want to learn from everyone that I have sitting on the couch or sofa opposite me. And I've always am learning from you, which I love. And I'm sure you're probably learning from me. We always learn from each other. And just building that confidence up to actually do what you want to do. And a podcast I've wanted to do probably for the last 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
And I've just been holding myself back on it.
How does it feel now?
It feels amazing.
Yeah, it does.
Sometimes you feel a little bit nervous doing your first thing when you're doing it, but when you're throwing yourself in that uncomfortable position, see how you can thrive and see how you act and how you are capable of doing it. And you will surprise yourself. You will always, always surprise yourself. Like doing public speaking, surprise yourself. You get so nervous. How can I speak for 60 minutes by myself?
You did that.
You can do it.
Yeah, you can.
Right? Again, you learn from others, get other people to show you how, and do it yourself. Right? There's never failures, only lessons. And just to be able to have conversations in depth with substance. And that's another thing that I really want to carry through in my podcast is, getting to the root of conversations.
I love that. So beautiful.
Throwing it back to you now, Laura. So thank you for that question.
Of
Appreciate
course.
you. Can you talk about a time when something happened in your life that made you look at things differently?
Oh, so many things. I think almost the example that I gave of Africa was like one of those pivotal moments. Also, one of the most, let's go a little bit more vulnerable here. One of the most profound experiences I've had that gave me a full shift as well, which was almost more recently. When I came back from overseas and COVID was kind of happening at the same time, I went to live with my parents for, I think it was a year, maybe just under a year. And I haven't always had the greatest relationship with my dad. And he nearly passed. That's the reason I came back from overseas. Mum was like, your dad's got 24 hours to live. You need to fly back. And I was very calm. It was very interesting. I just had no doubt in my mind. I had so much faith that he was going to be okay and everything was all good, given I had not had a great relationship with him. And when I got back, he made it through. Like, we had a profoundly magical experience. He was in a coma. Most of his organs were failed at this point, and he wasn't meant to survive. It was almost impossible for him to survive. And I just remember feeling incredibly positive and optimistic about this experience whilst, in the waiting room, the family was quite distraught, obviously, naturally. And I remember walking into the room and everyone was preparing me like, this is what you're going to see. It's going to be quite confronting. And I felt nothing but love. It was very interesting. I walked into the emergency room where he was in a private room, and I remember looking at him and I almost started giggling because there's one thing I know about my dad is he is the biggest kid you will ever meet. Like, beneath all of his challenges,
I think we're all
he is
big
a joke.
kids.
100%. We're like in adult bodies, right? So funny.
The inner child coming out.
Yeah. And I was like, how can I bring more life to this man? How can I bring more life and energy into this beautiful man that is struggling in front of me? And so I came in and I was like, oh, Dad, I can't believe you had to pretend to be asleep to get me back from overseas. Like, here I am. It worked. Like, just being fully sarcastic with him. And I was like, I got your favorite bourbon, like you asked. And I just remember this like childlike grin come on his face and his eyes started flickering open. And the doctors were like, what on earth? How is this possible? And within maybe like 24 hours later, less than, he started coming back to life. And I remember him coming out of this and it just really shifted my perspective. And he said, when I was about to walk into the light and my time had gone and I knew this was it, you came in at the end of this white tunnel as an angelic being and asked me to come back down because my time wasn't done. And since that moment, it gave me this new understanding of, life is such a beautiful gift and we can take it for granted. And all of the things that we hold on to that can create more pain and disease in the body of holding on to what has been versus what is right now can be so debilitating. So I remember a year later, I was living with him after COVID and all that stuff was happening. And I just had this feeling like I need to understand why we had such a difficult time growing up together, because I had taken so much shame and guilt from the challenges that he had been through in the past. And I was at the bare front of all of it. Like, me and him just never got along. He got along with most of the family. But I was the one that was always like speaking up, fighting for what I believed was right. And he did not enjoy any part of that. So we were always arguing. And I sat with him one day and I said, what was the reason for the level of abuse that I experienced with you? Like, I love you. I care for you. I'm not judging you. I just want to understand it. And what he said to me that day was so profound and it's changed my mindset forever. He said, I saw so much of the mistakes I was making when I was your age in you, and I wanted to protect you because I love you so much. And although his approach wasn't the best, I then understood why he approached me in those ways, because it's all he knew. And that was like verbal abuse and all these things that he can't remember because he was drunk most of the time. But it tarnished me until it didn't anymore. And then when I understood it, I transmuted that pain and that suffering and that energy into a better sense of understanding of self and the beautiful man in front of me. And that was when I was 28, somewhere around there. And that was such a profound experience that, again, coming back to the quote, seek first to understand before being understood. We can't assume why people do anything until you actually understand the person.
Firstly, thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
And you can always just never assume that it's your fault. Like, that person's angry at you. It could be internally on their own side of things where they could be just taking their own anger out on you, and it's nothing to do with you.
So hard to know in the moment, right?
It's so hard to know in the moment, but when you can consciously put yourself in that position and go, hang on a second, this isn't nothing to do with me. This has nothing to do with me. And then just show grace towards the person and allow them to just see that.
Totally.
And that will just bring them back down and just allow them to be back on the level with you if you show them grace instead of giving that energy back to them.
Totally. And ask them the right questions. Like, what's going on? Are you okay? Instead of like, oh, I feel attacked.
I just have a few. We're going to start wrapping up, but I just got a few more questions for you. Can you just please share one more story about someone who really helped you grow or learn something important?
Oh, who helped me grow and
helped
something
you
important.
grow, correct.
there's been so many beautiful, profound moments that I have experienced in my life. And most of them have come through almost hardship, which is really interesting, right? Hardship in the moment, the things that we find challenging, and then they become our greatest victory and our greatest asset. The person that has helped me the most, I would definitely say my dad. One of the hardest relationships in my life and the most profoundly moving relationships in my life because we are so similar. And it's helped us both understand deeper parts of ourselves. And I know this might sound like a bit of a cop-out, but every single woman in sisterhood, like every woman that has crossed my path, and I have the honor to be hosting every single one of these events. So as that space holder, if you will, it's almost like you are downloading the information and the codes of every individual in those events because you have the honor of being in their presence. And you really get to understand why they're there and what their mission is. And so that in itself, and through my coaching, I learn something from everyone because I'm open to receiving a new insight from everyone that I meet.
Love that.
Thank you.
Now we're going to come. I've just got, this is the last question I've
Oh
got
my
for you, Laura.
God. What?
And it's a good one. So if you could go back and give yourself some advice when you were younger, what would you say?
Oh, fuck.
I was waiting till that word came out.
I made no promises at the start of this that they wouldn't be swear words.
Yeah.
So it's my default mode. Great. This is such an interesting one. I've always said, like, never live in regret from anything and just take your lessons as you go. If I was to go back and give advice to that younger part of myself, it would almost be just breathe. Like, seriously, the simplicity in that. I think, in fact, that's exactly what I'm going to finish it on because breathwork has been a huge part of my journey. From, being in hospital, losing my left lung, to understanding the power of breathwork and how we can rebuild ourselves, to struggling with chronic anxiety and letting fear debilitate me so many times, and then understanding the power of breath to tap into the body and out of the mind, which is the mind usually creates the fears through our thoughts. So I honestly want to say, and I know this sounds so simple, yet it is profound, just breathe.
I know it's simple, but it's so true.
It is so true. I mean, speaking to an Aries and Taurus, I'm like all fire.
Yeah.
And just want to take action all the time. So to stop and to breathe is so underrated.
Yes. And we're not really taught how to breathe properly either, are we?
Not when you have anxiety.
Not when you have anxiety or when you're stressed. It's just so
or you're overexcited. I mean, that's anxiety in a sense as well, right?
Exactly. Well, I like to
cortisol.
turn, whenever you're nervous, I like to turn those nerves into excitement. And it is just a moment to take yourself away from the situation that you're in and just take a few really deep breaths and just watch how it will just regulate your nervous system and just really bring that heart rate down and just bring you back to the now, the present moment, which I love.
So funny that we've both studied that as well.
I know.
I used to think it was such a dumb question. Have you practiced breath work before? And I'm like, we're breathing our whole lives. What the hell do people mean when they ask this question? And I really underestimated you have to retrain your body to breathe correctly in order to come to a calm state.
But with the daily practice of breath work, you really start to see the internal growth. It's not external, it's internal. It actually rewires your brain. It allows you to be a lot more positive thinking, right? But anyway, Laura, I really appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to talk with me on my very first episode. Thank you for popping my cherry. Hey guys, thank you for listening today on Self Mastery. I am Tom Bowditch, and we will be going and I'll be talking with you on the next episode. Thank you very much and have a great day.
And before we wrap up, also, thank you so much for having me on the show and for actually stepping into courage and power and victory by choosing what you know you were destined to do, which is share your story and also bring others into a greater sense of power. So thank you for having me on as your numero uno. So happy to pop your cherry. And thanks for being my best friend.
Of course.
You have helped me in so many profound ways. So thank you for being you. You're welcome.
Thank you.